The moment I signed a $1.25 billion deal, I thought I'd secured my legacy, until they handed me a letter that erased my name, my title, and half my salary in one cold, calculated move. The envelope was already on the table when I walked in. No handshake, no eye contact, just that thin white rectangle with my name typed too neatly like someone had triple-checked it. Effective immediately, James said without looking up. Your title has been changed to strategic liaison. Compensation adjusted accordingly. That was it. No congratulations. No thank you. Just a new title I'd never heard of and a 55% pay cut. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not because I was shocked, but because something colder had already crept up the back of my neck. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 38 years old, and until 6 minutes ago, I was the Senior Director of Aerospace Contracts at Grayson Aeronautics. Just last week, I closed the largest deal in company history, a $1.25 billion order for 5 long-range jets from an American conglomerate. 8 months of red-eyes, translations, backdoor negotiations, domestic compliance headaches, and I did it alone. I should have been celebrated. But instead, I sat across from a man who couldn't even say my name out loud. 20 minutes earlier, I stood outside this very room, preparing notes on post-deal logistics. That's when the door opened. Sarah walked out first, fresh-faced, 30 at most, and bouncing on her heels like she already owned the place. I recognized her. Bright, ambitious, and dangerously unqualified. I had trained her during her internship 2 years ago. Behind her was James, laughing. They shook hands, casual, confident, synchronized. Neither saw me watching. Now here I was holding a letter that had been printed yesterday, informing me I no longer held the position I had built from scratch. They didn't just strip my title. They erased me quietly, cleanly, and a day in advance. I folded the letter, tucked it into my bag, and stood. I didn't say a word because this wasn't the time to fight. It was the time to remember everything. Every smile, every silence, every name. They thought I was finished. But the ink wasn't even dry yet. The nameplate was gone. Not replaced, not misspelled, just gone. Where it once read, Eleanor Hayes, Senior Director, the frosted glass door outside my office now stood bare, wiped clean like my 15 years at Grayson had never happened. I stood there for a long moment, unsure whether to knock or grieve. That room, my room, was no longer mine. An intern passed behind me, balancing 2 coffee trays, and did a double take. Need help finding something? She asked innocently, not recognizing me. I gave a tight smile. No, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And then I turned away, gripping the handles of the cardboard box HR had kindly labeled Eleanor's personal effects, and walked toward the elevators down 5 floors, past departments I hadn't visited since my junior associate days. That's where I found my new space. Not an office, a cubicle, windowless, phoneless, the kind with carpeted half walls and a flickering overhead light. Someone had left a tangled phone cord in the drawer. It smelled like toner and lemon disinfectant. No nameplate, no welcome, just a post-it on the monitor. Eleanor, I will set you up by end of day. I sat in the flimsy chair and looked around. On the wall across from me hung the new company org chart, freshly printed and laminated. I walked over slowly, hoping some part of me was still visible. I wasn't. Not at the top, not in the footnotes, not even under the project contributors section. Sarah Thompson had taken my spot, Director of Global Strategy Initiatives. The caption under her profile photo read, "A bold new vision for Grayson's global future." I closed my eyes. The sharp ache that rose in my chest wasn't anger. It was mourning. Mourning for the version of me that had poured everything into this place. I wasn't just replaced. I was erased. That afternoon, a junior assistant from marketing stopped by, arms full of folders for a presentation. These were printed for tomorrow's leadership update. Can you make sure they get to Sarah? I nodded numbly and took them. As she walked away, I noticed one folder had a page sticking out, a printed slide deck titled Contract Finalization Chicago Team, led by Eleanor Hayes. My photo was there. I remembered the day it was taken after the signing, champagne glasses still in our hands, but someone had taken a red marker and crossed out my face. Literally, a thick red X. The slide had been reprinted with Sarah's name and headshot in the final copy. I went back to my cubicle, opened the file cabinet beneath the desk, and flipped through the rows of labeled binders, the ones I had built, organized, color-coded, notes from every phase of negotiation. Except now, every tab that once read EH had been overwritten with ST. Eleanor Hayes had vanished. Sarah Thompson had taken her place. Her initials scrawled in hurried pen across contracts I had written in blood and no sleep. I closed the drawer gently and sat very still. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just let the silence settle in. What hurt most wasn't that they'd taken the office or the title or even the credit. It was that they had done it so easily. And I realized something then, something cold and solid. If they could erase me this fast, it meant they never intended to keep me. I didn't sleep for 8 months. I counted from the first email sent at 3:20 in the morning to the final video call that wrapped past midnight in Chicago. I was the only person holding the pieces of the $1.25 billion deal together. And now sitting in a cubicle with someone else's initials on my binders, I wondered how they forgot that so fast. No, they didn't forget. They never bothered to understand. There were nights I reviewed engine specs on the floor of a layover hotel in Denver, eyes burning from jet lag. There were mornings I smoothed my blazer over a hospital gown to take calls from Seattle after collapsing from sheer exhaustion and dehydration. And there was one December, just 2 days before Christmas, when I sat alone in an airport cafe watching my mother's FaceTime call ring out. I missed our annual dinner for the first time in 17 years. She said she understood, but I still saw the hurt behind her eyes. I gave Grayson everything. Every hour, every sacrifice, every version of myself. And when SkyTech, our direct competitor, approached me 3 months ago with an offer to lead their global strategy team, I declined. I'm loyal to Grayson, I told them. They offered stock. I said no. I went back to my office, shut the door, and kept working on the contract. That contract was my lifeline, my legacy. I hand-built every clause, reviewed every risk assessment, translated cultural nuances, caught errors that legal missed, and at the heart of it all was Clause 47B. It wasn't part of the standard draft. It wasn't even proposed by legal. It came during a dinner in Boston when the client COO leaned in and said, "We've been burned before. We need assurance. If you're not leading the implementation, the deal dies." So, I added the clause myself quietly without telling James or Sarah. I wrote it in plain language. Operational oversight shall remain under Eleanor Hayes in the event of reassignment. Client may void this agreement. They signed. We celebrated. And now the very line I had written to protect the client's trust had become my only line of defense, hidden in plain sight, unread by those too arrogant to believe I was indispensable. I leaned back in my creaky chair, fists clenched beneath the desk, not out of rage, but resolve. They thought they stole the deal from me, but I never gave it away. The strange thing about betrayal is that it always echoes backward. Sitting in that gray cubicle, staring at the name Sarah Thompson on contracts I had bled to build, I kept thinking about one night, the one moment I had truly felt seen. And it wasn't at Grayson. It was in Chicago. The last phase of negotiations had pushed all of us to the brink. Legal teams were feuding over jurisdictional clauses. Engineering leads kept changing specs midstream, and the client's board was growing restless. The deal was hanging by threads no one else could see, but I was the one holding them. That Friday night, the CEO of the client company, Michael Bennett, sent me a text. Dinner, just us. No agenda. 7:30 in the evening, Michigan Avenue. I hesitated. We still had unresolved drafts, but something about the wording told me this wasn't about paperwork. When I arrived at the quiet wood-paneled restaurant tucked near the Chicago River, he was already seated. No assistants, no laptops, just a glass of red and a folded linen napkin. I wanted to speak with you off record, he began. Not as executives, as people. I said nothing, just listened. He told me about their last deal, a $1 billion aerospace contract that collapsed mid-implementation because the negotiator was suddenly removed. No explanation. The replacement had no context, no connection, and no credibility. It cost us 3 years, he said, and half our reputation. Then he looked at me right in the eyes. Eleanor, we're not signing with Grayson. We're signing with you. If you disappear, the deal disappears too. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not praise, not performance metrics. Trust. Genuine human trust. I nodded and promised him I'd see it through, beginning to end. Back in my hotel room that night, a handwritten envelope had been slid under my door. Inside was a short note penned in deliberate cursive. To the one who earned our confidence through action, not title. We don't forget those who carry weight with grace. Michael Bennett. I kept that letter in my planner, tucked behind business cards and boarding passes. No one at Grayson ever saw it. They wouldn't have cared. But now, as I sat surrounded by silence and erased initials, I opened that letter again, creased but intact. They could replace my name on every chart, but they could never recreate that night in Chicago. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 8 a.m, just like I always had. No one expected me to. After what they'd done, stripping my title, cutting my salary, replacing my name, they likely assumed I'd disappear, walk away in silence, or storm out in rage. That's how people usually go when they've been humiliated. But I showed up, hair tied back, blazer pressed, eyes forward, and not a single soul knew what to do with me. Sarah walked past my cubicle once that morning. She didn't say anything, just glanced sideways like she wasn't sure whether to smile or avoid eye contact altogether. I gave her nothing. No smile, no bitterness, no reaction. Across the hall, James's door remained half open. He hadn't spoken to me since the demotion, not even a formal debrief. I caught his reflection once in the glass. He looked straight at me, then looked away. I didn't chase them. I didn't demand to be heard. Instead, I turned to my screen and began writing emails, not applications, not goodbye notes, blueprints. One by one, I reconnected with former colleagues, people I trusted, engineers I once flew across states with, procurement leads who owed me more than one deadline, even 2 former Grayson execs now quietly leading teams at competitor firms. I didn't ask for help. I just asked questions, soft ones, strategic ones. If someone with deep aerospace compliance experience were available in the next quarter, would that be of interest? Do you still oversee post-deal integration workflows? How's the morale on your domestic team lately? I wasn't planting seeds. I was checking soil conditions. That Thursday, I took a call during my lunch break. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Area code 202, Washington, D.C., Eleanor Hayes, the voice asked. Calm, professional. Yes, I replied, glancing at my screen. My name is Emily Carter. I'm an independent contract law attorney. I just reviewed the agreement tied to the Grayson Skyjet deal. I sat up straighter. She continued, I believe you authored Clause 47B. I did, I said carefully. There was a pause. Then it's airtight. Simple language, direct intent, and enforceable in any domestic court. They don't realize what you gave them. I exhaled slowly. Something between relief and confirmation settled in my chest. They're blind, she added. That clause was the smartest part of the entire deal, and they've walked right past it. That night, I stayed late, not working, just watching the office hum around me. Sarah left early. James didn't come out at all. I sat alone in that small cubicle in the glow of a desktop monitor, with one hand resting gently on the drawer that held the original copy of the contract, still with my ink, still with my initials. I said nothing. I sent no warning, no clue, because power, when you truly hold it, doesn't shout. It waits quietly, confidently until it's needed, and they had no idea I still had it. I didn't go to Seattle. Sarah did. She left on Monday morning, strutting through the Reagan National Executive Terminal like someone who'd earned the right to be there. First-class boarding pass, fresh-pressed blazer, a new Grayson-issued briefcase I'd once picked out for high-level travel. Ironic. I heard she smiled all the way through boarding. I didn't wish her luck. I didn't say a word because I knew something she didn't. The client's headquarters sat in Dallas, a sleek marble and glass structure I knew well. I'd been there 3 times, knew which espresso in the lobby was drinkable, which elevator lagged, and how the CEO's assistant liked her documents formatted. By the time Sarah arrived at 10:12 in the morning, she'd already sent a check-in selfie to someone in HR. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the name Eleanor Hayes wasn't just tied to the signature page. It was built into the bones of the deal. The message hit Grayson HQ like a brick through glass. At 4:30 in the afternoon, a formal email arrived from Skyjet's legal department. It was short, cold, precise. Per Clause 47B, this contract is contingent upon post-deal transition being led by Ms. Eleanor Hayes. We do not recognize substitutes. No further meetings will be held. They copied everyone: James, Sarah, legal, compliance, even the board. No sugarcoating, no wiggle room. And just like that, the $1.25 billion handover had no one to lead it because I wasn't in Seattle, and no one had asked me to be. I found out about the email when a junior analyst walked past my cubicle. Wide-eyed, he didn't say anything, but his expression said it all. People started whispering in break rooms, elevator lobbies, Slack threads disguised as team check-ins. No one mentioned my name out loud, but they didn't have to. The story leaked. Apparently, someone in the comms team tried to turn it into a press blurb. Something light. A pivot story. An hour later, the draft vanished. Rumor had it James ordered the entire thread deleted and warned internal comms. No coverage, not a word about Seattle. But it was too late. I didn't have to be in that building in Dallas. I didn't have to raise my voice or post online. I just had to wait. And I did. By 7:45 in the evening, I was still at my desk sipping cold coffee and watching unread messages stack up in my inbox. Subject lines like client delay, urgent, need clarification, clause 47B. Did you write this part of the contract? All of them sent in a panic. None of them addressed to me. Still, I was in every sentence. Sarah didn't stop by the next morning. James didn't call. But I heard someone say she cried in the executive bathroom. Maybe that part was true. Maybe it wasn't. I didn't care because I had done nothing but be remembered. And they had done everything to be forgotten. And now they were locked out of a deal I no longer had to defend. By 9 in the morning the next day, the executive floor was vibrating with panic. You could hear it through muffled walls, fast footsteps, voices that were too sharp for casual conversations. No one smiled. No one made eye contact. I didn't need a calendar invite to know what was happening. James had called an emergency meeting while I sat quietly downstairs, pretending to type a report that no one would read. The top brass at Grayson scrambled. Phones rang nonstop. Legal huddled behind locked doors. PR drafted 3 versions of a press release, none of which ever saw daylight. And in the boardroom, it wasn't pretty. A colleague who owed me more than one quiet favor sent me a message that read only, James is trying to blame legal. It's not going well. They were spinning hard. First, James claimed Clause 47B slipped through because legal had been understaffed. Then he argued the client was overreacting and would come around with the right wording. Next, he blamed me for being too involved in the deal. That was the part that made me laugh quietly, bitterly. I heard later that someone on the board finally cut through the noise. Her name was Margaret Collins, sharp, strategic, and never known for raising her voice. But she had reviewed the contract herself twice. She raised her hand and said slowly, "Let's stop pretending this was a clerical error. I recall a closed-door conversation just weeks before the signing where James explicitly said Eleanor was making leadership look weak, that her visibility needed to be scaled back." No one responded. I wasn't in that room, but my silence filled it anyway. By 2:25 in the afternoon, the final blow came. An email from Skyjet. Subject line: contract status. Formal termination notice. The body was brutal in its precision. Due to unapproved personnel changes in violation of Clause 47B, Skyjet considers the contract null and void. All associated obligations are hereby dissolved. It wasn't just addressed to Grayson's executive team. It was also sent to the investors group inbox, the press relations team, the private inbox of every board member. That night, I stayed late, not out of duty, but to observe. James's door stayed shut. Sarah's light never came on. From my cubicle, I could hear the hallway clock ticking. I watched 3 different executives leave the building without their jackets. One of them looked like he'd been crying. Someone from accounting walked past my desk and stopped. "You okay?" she asked, awkward but sincere. I nodded. Fine. Because I was, for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel erased. I didn't feel powerless. I had written that clause. I had protected the deal. They ignored me, and now they were watching everything they built start to slide. In the end, there was no press release, no spin, just silence, panic, and a void they couldn't explain away. And I sat in it, calm, uninvited, still here. It came at 9:15 in the morning on a Wednesday. I was refilling my coffee when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. I almost didn't answer. I was tired of everything, but something told me to take it. "Eleanor Hayes," a smooth voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Daniel Patel from SkyTech. We spoke a few months ago. I believe the timing wasn't quite right then." I paused, letting the words settle. "I remember," I said. "Well, I'm hoping it is now," he continued. "I'd like to revisit our offer with a few upgrades." I walked slowly back to my desk, the paper cup warm in my hand, but already forgotten. Daniel didn't waste time. He laid it all out clearly. Double the base salary, equity stake, relocation flexibility if I wanted it, but also a dedicated floor in their new Chicago office, 3 blocks from Grayson. "And one more thing," he added, voice quieting slightly. "This wasn't just our idea. We were encouraged to reach back out." "By who?" I asked. There was a pause. Then by Michael Bennett. "He called you a non-negotiable asset. Said the deal fell apart because you weren't in it and he doesn't want the next one unless you are." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I leaned back in the chair Grayson had downgraded me to and looked at the scuffed corner of my cubicle wall. I remembered what it felt like to be erased, to be reduced to silence, to initials that no longer matched the power behind them. And now here I was, not begging, not pitching, being invited, chosen. "Daniel," I said carefully, "I appreciate the offer, but before we talk numbers again, I have a condition." "Of course," he replied quickly. "What do you need? I choose my team. I approve every hire under my division, especially in post-deal integration. No exceptions." Another pause, but shorter this time. "Done," he said. "Anything else?" "Yes," I added. "One more thing." I opened the drawer and pulled out a manila folder I had kept sealed since Chicago. Inside was a note, the letter Michael had slipped under my hotel room door that night. I reread it silently, heart steady this time. "I don't just want to oversee deals," I said. "I want full life cycle authority from negotiation to implementation to renewal." "You'll have it," Daniel answered. No hesitation. By the end of the call, I hadn't said yes, but I hadn't said no. I hung up, placed the phone face down on my desk, and stared out the window, watching a flock of birds cross the sky above the Grayson headquarters tower. The same glass box that had tried to trap me, then replace me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about restoration, about what happens when you don't just survive being erased. You become the name they can't move forward without. And this time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I was the one making the call. It felt surreal. Sitting in a boardroom overlooking downtown Chicago, Sun slicing through the tall windows, leather folders lined across a custom walnut table. Same contract, same jets, same billion-dollar figures. But this time, I wasn't just in the room, I was leading it. The pen in my hand felt heavier than usual. Maybe because it wasn't just ink anymore. It was a signature that meant everything had changed. "Ready when you are," Daniel said, sliding the final agreement across the table. I looked down at the front page. Total contract value $1.125 billion. Client, Skyjet Aerospace. Vendor, Skytech Global. Oversight. Executive, Eleanor Hayes. My name wasn't just on the document. It was embedded into its very function. Skyjet had been clear in their final draft. All stages of post-deal operations, logistics, compliance, client reporting must be managed directly by Eleanor Hayes. Substitution is not permitted. They weren't taking any more chances. And honestly, neither was I. When I signed, I didn't just close a deal. I reclaimed my place, not at Grayson, but above it. I had left their building quietly. I had absorbed the humiliation. I had sat in silence while they rewrote history with someone else's name. Now I was signing the future without them. The press release went live at 10:30 in the morning. Full-color spread on Skytech's homepage. Within minutes, Bloomberg and Reuters picked it up. Skytech secures landmark jet contract with Skyjet. Former Grayson executive leads new era of aviation strategy. I didn't check Grayson's reaction. I didn't need to. But according to a text from someone still inside, Sarah saw the article on LinkedIn during a leadership huddle. She froze mid-sentence. James read it half an hour later in his private office. Neither one of them had known. No memo, no leak, just a public unveiling they couldn't undo. There was no call from them, no message, not even a polite congratulations. But I didn't want it because in that moment I didn't need an apology. I had the proof on paper, in ink, in headlines. And the only thing more satisfying than being recognized was knowing they'd been replaced in silence by the very person they erased. Me. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped out onto the top floor of Skytech's new Chicago headquarters. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling glass, soft track lighting guiding me forward. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the new card. Eleanor Hayes, Chief Global Officer, Skytech. 3 months ago, I had been erased from a door. Now, my name was engraved in the strategy that would shape an entire industry. As I made my way toward the boardroom, I passed a glass-walled lounge where a large screen played muted news footage. I didn't stop, but I saw the headline scroll across the ticker. Grayson announces 200 job cuts amid failed deal fallout. CEO James Grayson exits company. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. I felt release. They had tried to shrink me, and now their empire was folding into itself like a paper crane dipped in water. The very people who dismissed me had gambled on silence. But silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. My phone buzzed once in my hand. A text from Sarah. "Can we talk?" I think I made a mistake. I looked at it for a moment. Then I locked the screen and slid it into my bag. No reply, no explanation. There was nothing left to say. I pushed open the boardroom door and stepped into a room of waiting executives. The energy shifted. In my hand was a new deal, $3.1 billion, a global supply and service agreement. And just like before, one clause written in plain language, all operations must remain under direct oversight of Eleanor Hayes. As I took my seat at the head of the table, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about legacy, not the kind they print in brochures, the kind that echoes quietly in rooms where your name carries weight no title ever could. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, replaced by someone who never walked the road you paved, then you know what this moment feels like. And if you've made it through that storm, then I want you to remember this. You don't have to shout to win. You don't have to fight dirty to rise. Sometimes the most powerful comeback is when you say nothing and sign everything. If this story hit home, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and if you've ever been replaced. I want to hear what happened. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because out there, someone else is sitting in silence wondering if they matter. Let's remind them they do. Eleanor sat in her new Chicago office, the weight of her SkyTech business card in her hand. She realized then that loyalty to a company could blind her to her own worth. The lesson was clear. Her value wasn't in a title or a cubicle. It was in the trust she built, the work she owned, and the strength to walk away when she was no longer seen. When Ava discovered her name erased from her family's will after years of silently saving their home, she faced a chilling truth. Love can be a ledger, and her sacrifices were never tallied. I'm Ava. Last winter, when a snowstorm swept across Ohio and the temperature dropped below 10 degrees Fahrenheit, I wired $6,400 to replace the furnace in my parents' house in the suburbs of Columbus. Right before the pipes nearly froze solid, no one asked me to do it. In fact, they didn't even know the furnace had failed. But I knew. I always knew. That year, my father, James, had just recovered from spinal surgery and could barely walk. My mother, Linda, had advanced arthritis, her fingers too stiff to hold a phone for more than a minute. They couldn't get down to the basement to check the system. And my brother, Ethan, was working on music in the garage, meaning he was playing guitar and live streaming riffs that barely got any views. It was also me the year before who paid the full $3,890 in property taxes after they forgot and nearly got hit with a penalty. I still remember I was in the middle of a board meeting when Mom texted, "Call me when you have a sec. No rush." That was her code red. I opened the banking app and made the payment before the county flagged their account. I never told anyone about these things. No one knew I had to cancel a trip to Florida just to scrape together money for their car insurance in 2021. No one knew I quietly paid for 3 of Mom's prescriptions over 6 months when her Medicare coverage had issues. I knew those prescription codes better than the pharmacist did. My parents always called me stable. They liked that word like it was a personality trait, rather than the result of working nearly 60 hours a week for 12 straight years, never taking more than 2 days off in a row. To them, I was the child they didn't need to worry about. The one who never failed. The one who didn't call crying halfway through the month. The one who didn't burden them. The one who didn't disappoint. I remember Mom once said, "Ava, you're such a blessing. I've never had to lose sleep over you." I smiled and said, "Thanks, Mom." Even though in my head I wondered, did she ever stop to ask why she didn't have to? Ethan was different. He'd dropped out of college twice. Once in psychology, once in music studies. He was always in a phase of finding himself. Whenever he ran into trouble, the whole family mobilized like he was the center of a storm, and everyone else had to brace. Me? I only came up when a solution was needed. One summer, I visited and found the lawn knee-high. The mower was broken. Dad couldn't fix it. And Ethan said he had a guitar wrist strain. I called a landscaping service, prepaid for a month, then climbed a ladder and cleared the gutters myself. No one asked me to. When I got back to Cleveland, Mom texted, "The house looks great. Ethan must have cleaned up, huh?" I read it and let out a dry laugh. I didn't help to be praised. I helped because it was my home, my family. But over time, I started to wonder, did anyone really see what I was carrying? Or did they only see the things I made disappear? That house. I pulled it back from the brink more than once, but they never named me in their stories of being saved. They just said, "Good thing we have Ava. She's resourceful." Then immediately moved on to talk about Ethan's latest idea for a soundtrack to some indie animated film. I stayed silent for years, but something in me started to crack one morning in March when I happened to notice a beige folder on the dining table, and inside it the quiet confirmation that everything I'd done had never been seen as worth naming. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house as usual, carrying a bag of prescriptions from Walgreens that I had paid for in advance. 3 types of blood pressure meds for my mom, arthritis medication, and a bottle of multivitamins she always forgot to take. My dad had texted earlier asking if I could help scan some documents for his new insurance application. The printer at their house was ancient, constantly jamming, and he never remembered where the power button was. I didn't think twice when I walked into the dining room and saw a stack of papers laid out neatly on the table along with a scribbled note from Dad. Scan all of these. I'm on the phone with Medicare. I sat down and started feeding pages into the machine. A few medical statements, a couple of utility bills, a letter from the bank. Then I saw it. A beige folder thicker than the rest, sealed and labeled in Mom's handwriting. Will notarized copy. I didn't open it right away. I sat there for nearly a minute, staring at the cover, my mind blank. But then, like an involuntary reflex, I pulled it open. I remembered very clearly I had just paid almost $2,500 in property taxes for them last week. 3 months before that, I covered the plumbing repair when the upstairs toilet overflowed into the hallway. I figured if I was old enough to shoulder every emergency, I was old enough to know what they planned for the future. And the truth was this. The entire estate, the fully paid-off 3-bedroom house, a savings account worth roughly $118,000, and a life insurance policy. All of it was left to Ethan D. Thompson, born in 1993, unemployed, currently residing at the same address. This very house. My name appeared just once in the footnotes. We love both of our children equally and trust they will care for one another in the spirit of family. I read that line over and over again. It was polite. It was clean. It didn't say, "We're cutting out our eldest daughter." But it also didn't acknowledge anything I'd done. It felt like writing, "We trust Ava will keep carrying the weight." No reward needed. I don't know how long I sat there. The scanner light kept blinking, the motor humming in the background. I could hear Dad in the living room talking on the phone about deductible limits and coverage caps. I stood up, took the folder, and walked into the living room. Dad looked back and smiled. "You finished scanning?" I held up the will. "What's this, Dad?" His smile disappeared instantly. I had never seen James Thompson, who taught U.S. history for over 20 years at the local high school, so silent. He stared at the folder like it was a grenade someone had pulled the pin from. He said, voice dry. "You weren't supposed to read that, Ava." He didn't answer. He sighed and slowly set his phone down. "It's not what you think." Still silent. I wasn't imagining anything. It was in blue ink on white paper with a notary stamp right there. "I get it," I said, oddly calm. "You and Mom believe Ethan needs it more than I do." He looked down. "You're stable, Ava. You've got a good job. You don't need it. You don't have to say anything else." I cut in, soft but final. "I understand perfectly." He nodded. No excuses, no apology. I stepped out onto the porch where the wooden swing I had assembled the previous spring was gently swaying in the April breeze. That day, I had also called a contractor to fix the collapsing front step. Ethan had said he was allergic to sawdust. As always, I had reached for my wallet like a machine that didn't question commands. I sat on the swing, eyes drifting to the backyard. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. My chest tightened, not from anger, but from emptiness. For the first time in my life, I wondered if I stopped showing up, would they even notice? The wind brushed through my hair, carrying the soft clink of the wind chime in the corner of the porch. I remembered I had ordered it from Etsy, a Christmas gift. Ethan had given Mom a handwritten card with 3 awkward lines of rhyme. She said she loved both gifts equally. I closed my eyes. There was no more pain in me, only something growing stronger, awakening. I was still sitting on the porch when my mother, Linda, opened the door and stepped out. She was wearing the faded pink cardigan I gave her for Mother's Day 2 years ago, the tag still attached because she had forgotten to cut it off. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, twisting the sleeve in her hands. I could hear her breathing more clearly than her words. "Ava," she began, her voice so quiet, I almost thought I imagined it. I didn't turn around. I let the wind brush across my face in place of an answer. "We didn't mean for you to find out that way," she said, then sat down beside me, keeping just enough distance to avoid meeting my eyes. I didn't respond. No nod, no shake, just silence. Ethan, he's never had the kind of stability you do, she continued, eyes fixed on the wooden step below us. He struggles. He's lost. I thought you'd understand that. I clenched my fists, nails pressing into my palms. You thought I'd understand being erased from my own family's will? It wasn't erasure, she said quickly, her voice trembling. We just believed you wouldn't need as much as he does. Believed, I repeated. Believed the only child who paid for the roof repairs, property taxes, blood pressure meds wouldn't need anything at all. She turned away. A gust of wind blew her hair across her glasses, and she slowly untangled it, dragging the silence a few more seconds. Finally, she whispered, because your father and I co-signed a loan for Ethan for an independent animation project. I turned sharply to her. How much? She didn't answer. Mom, I'll ask again. How much? $35,000. Her voice barely came out. I stood up. A number, not a guess, not a feeling, not vague favoritism. A real debt with real dollars signed by my real parents and me. I was only there when the fridge short-circuited, when the sink clogged, when the washer stopped mid-cycle. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the logic echoed perfectly in my head. Ethan needs, so he gets. Ava is capable, so she does. I walked down to the lawn, circling the old oak tree where Ethan once carved E+L with my car key while I was napping on the couch. I'd yelled at him for that. My dad said he's just a kid. Ethan was 21 at the time. I walked back up the steps. Mom was still sitting there, eyes unfocused. Did you ever stop to ask? I said, voice even. Why I never needed to call mid-month asking for $200 like Ethan. She stayed silent. Because I'd been cleaning up messes since I was a teenager, I continued. I didn't choose that role, but every time Ethan failed, I patched it up. Every time you needed something done right, I did it. Mom bit her lip as if wanting to say something, but finding no words. I get it now, I said. It's not because Ethan deserved more. It's because you tied yourselves to him with that loan, with expectations even you don't believe in. And me? I'm the invisible collateral you assumed would never call. A soft sound came from the door. My dad was standing there, one hand on the frame, his face blank with exhaustion. He didn't step outside, just stood like a shadow, witnessing a verdict. It's not that simple, Ava, he said. No, Dad. You're right, I replied. It's much simpler. You chose to keep this house by trading away your daughter. And once the paperwork was signed, everything under Ethan's name, you came back expecting me to pay the utility bills like nothing happened. No one said a word, and that said more than anything else could. I didn't need to hear more. No apologies, no justifications. I walked into the house, grabbed the bag of prescriptions I had left on the kitchen counter, and headed straight to my car. The sun was starting to lower, casting a warm glow over the house I once thought was home. Now just a fragile shelter built on debt and deliberate silence. I started the engine and didn't look back. 3 days after that afternoon, I walked out of my parents' house. I opened my banking app and canceled every automatic payment. The $325 a month I'd been auto-depositing to cover their utility bills stopped. Mom's CVS CarePass prescription schedule deleted. The Instacart account that sent groceries every Friday afternoon paused indefinitely. No announcement, no explanation, not a single warning line, just a silence. Deliberate. Calculated. I thought they'd notice immediately, but they didn't. The first week passed in an eerie quiet. No texts, no calls, no emails. I figured maybe they really did believe I was so stable that I'd reboot like a vending machine after a power cut. On Saturday morning of the second week, while I was having breakfast with a friend at a lakeside cafe, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. Ava, the gas bill's higher this month. Can you check the account? See if we're covered? I set the phone down, didn't reply. In my mind, a familiar voice echoed. Help, like always. That afternoon, another message came from Mom. I forgot the low-sodium crackers. Ethan didn't remember either. Are you stopping by Whole Foods? I didn't open it, left it unread. By week 3, the break in rhythm began to rattle them. This time, Mom didn't include a greeting. Home insurance is due. You usually send it around this week, right? I read the message and typed a single line. Ask Ethan. It's his house now. I didn't wait for a response. Didn't wonder what they'd say next. I flipped the phone face down on my desk and returned to my meeting like nothing had happened. That night, while reviewing project notes under the soft yellow light in my 10th floor apartment, the phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another message popped up. Don't be like this, Ava. We need to talk. But I knew what talk meant. It wasn't conversation, it was recovery. They wanted me to slide back into place. The fixer, the scheduler, the silent backbone, the one who kept the machine running so no one else had to get uncomfortable. The next day, Ethan chimed in. Ava, this is getting out of hand. Just help them like you always do. Don't turn this into a drama. I replied with one line. You're the one they chose, so step up and act like it. No reply. I started sleeping better. No waking up at 2 a.m. to a text from Mom asking about a password. No scrolling through their payment due dates before my own calendar. I had breakfast alone, read novels, even planted 2 new basil pots on the balcony, something I kept putting off because I had to run back home and cook dinner for Mom and Dad. A week later, my bank app notified me of a Zelle request. Amount $2,850. Memo. This month's mortgage plus late penalty. Urgent. No greeting, no explanation, not even a please. My tap declined. 3 minutes later, Dad called. I didn't answer. An hour after that, Mom texted. If you don't help, we could lose the house. I stared at the screen for a long while, then quietly set the phone down and kept cooking dinner. For the first time in years, I cooked just for myself. Not to drop off later, not to freeze for them, not to portion out for anyone else. That night, I stood at my living room window looking out over the city. The soft gold of the streetlights made everything feel still, but inside me, it wasn't stillness. It was change. Not an argument. Not a dramatic exit. Just withdrawal. A space that had always been filled by duty was finally going quiet. And I let it stay quiet. I thought that after I declined the mortgage transfer, they'd stay silent. But I was wrong. Thursday morning, while waiting for coffee at the cafe near my office, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. I rarely use the app, but kept it to follow old community groups and college friends. The screen showed a familiar line. Linda Thompson has updated her status. Curious, I opened it. The first sentence stopped me mid-bite. We've spent our lives loving, raising, and sacrificing for our children, but sometimes even that's not enough. Below was a photo of my mother standing on the front porch, the one where I'd installed the swing, trimmed the lawn, and fixed the gutters in silence. The lighting was soft, evoking sadness, pity. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes. My aunt on Dad's side commented first. Linda, you're such a wonderful mother. Not every child knows how to appreciate that. A distant cousin I hadn't seen since Thanksgiving in 2012 wrote, This breaks my heart. Kids these days only think about themselves. I hope you find comfort. Scrolled further and then I saw it. Ethan, my younger brother, had reshared the post with the caption, Family isn't a condition, it's a commitment. No matter how tired I get, I'll never give up. Beneath his post was a parade of moral supporters. Ethan, you really are the light of that family. You've sacrificed so much. I hope things get better for you and your parents. I read each comment, my eyes locked on the screen, hands cold. These people, they had no idea that their light once pulled $7,000 from our parents' account to fund an animation company with no website, no tax ID. They didn't know who paid the utility bill when our service was shut off in 2019. No one knew because I never told them. And now I was the ungrateful daughter. No one asked me anything. No one messaged to fact-check. They swallowed a prepackaged narrative. The stable daughter had turned her back, and the struggling son was the hero keeping the family afloat. I wasn't angry. I just felt hollow. That night, I opened my laptop, thinking I might post a short explanation, but my hands froze above the keyboard. What would I even say? That I had paid nearly $30,000 over 6 years for debts that weren't mine? That I turned down a job in Denver to stay nearby just in case the water heater leaked again? Those truths typed out would only make me look like I was defending myself. And the truth is, I didn't need to prove anything anymore. What I needed was peace. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, but just before bed, a message came in from Sarah, the cousin I had once been closest to. "Are you okay? I don't know exactly what's going on, but I'd like to hear your side if you want to talk." That single message brought tears to my eyes. Maybe not everyone was so easily swept up in a made-up story. Maybe a few people still knew not to rush to judgment. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the screen for a long moment, then gently set it aside. Monday morning, I was getting ready to step into a meeting when the office phone rang. The receptionist's voice came through, a little tense. "Miss Thompson, there are 3 people at the front desk claiming to be your parents and brother. They say it's a family emergency." I stared at my computer screen for a few seconds, then answered simply, "Tell them I'm not available." And I didn't schedule any meeting with them. They said they'll wait. I hung up, took a deep breath, my hand tightened slightly on the armrest. So, when social media couldn't rescue them from their financial mess, they reverted to the old tactic. Close in, cling on, corner me into confrontation. I didn't run. I finished my presentation, signed an internal contract, then headed down to the lobby. They were standing there just past the glass doors, my father in a wrinkled white shirt, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed like he was waiting to command. My mother clutching her purse in both hands, dark circles under her eyes. Ethan, arms crossed, leaning against a granite column, staring at the floor. I stepped out of the elevator. No rush, no shock. "Ava," my mother called out as soon as she saw me. Her voice trembled, unclear whether from the cold or the fear of what she suspected was coming. I didn't say a word. I stood 3 steps away, far enough to keep boundaries, close enough to not look like I was hiding. My father spoke first. "We need to talk." I looked directly at him, and there's nothing to talk about. He frowned. "You'd really let us lose the house over a bruised ego?" I tilted my head. "And you really thought I'd stand still while being erased from my own family?" My mother took a step forward, pleading, "Don't be like this, Ava. I know you're hurt, but this wasn't intentional." I gave a soft laugh. "Not intentional." Carefully wording the will, signing off on Ethan's loan. "Those were all just accidents." Ethan cut in. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I never asked for any of this. I didn't even know what they wrote in those papers." I turned to him for the first time in years, not looking away. "But you accepted it, didn't you? The assets, the title, the role of selfless son." Ethan looked down. My mother gripped her sleeve tightly and repeated, "You've always been strong, Ava. We thought you understood. All these years you've never—" I cut her off because I'm strong. You thought I didn't need anything. Not to be chosen, not to be thanked, not to be remembered. My father grew impatient. His tone sharpened. "We raised you, sent you to school. Isn't it petty to count debts at your age?" I nodded slowly. "Then consider everything I've done over the years as settling that tab. I don't owe anything now." My mother's eyes welled up. I looked at her, my voice firmer this time. "You didn't lose me when you rewrote the will. You lost me the moment you believed I would never walk away." No one said another word. No tears, no hugs, no negotiations. I stepped back. "I have a meeting. This is a workplace, not a stage for family theatrics. I'd appreciate your respect." I turned and walked back inside. The sound of the glass door closing behind me felt like the period at the end of a chapter. 2 months after that confrontation in the office lobby, I got an email from the old property alert system I had once set up for my parents back when I still handled everything for them. The subject line was crystal clear: foreclosure notice for 2487 Maplewood Drive. I stared at the screen. Not surprised, not angry, just confirmation. I didn't need to read further to know what had happened. Ethan had burned through it all. They were out. And the house where I once cleaned gutters, replaced bulbs, fixed doorknobs, was now in the bank's crosshairs. Thought I'd feel pain, but the first sensation was relief. I didn't call, didn't email, didn't try to salvage anything. I didn't reach out to our old lawyer to ask for forbearance. I simply shut the laptop, stood up, grabbed my coat, and stepped out of the apartment. The April streets were soft, the sunlight thin like paper, just enough to warm my cheeks as I walked toward the park. For the next week, messages kept coming. A voicemail from my mother. "We don't know what to do, Ava. They say the house will be sealed off next week. Can you help even a little?" A missed call from my father. No message. Just a sigh cut off halfway. Then Ethan, one single text. "Everything's falling apart. You happy now?" I didn't respond. Not because I was happy, but because I was no longer obligated to carry the weight of choices that weren't mine. I still went to work, still grabbed coffee at my usual place, still did my grocery run on Saturdays, and over the weekend, I planted a new patch of lavender in the corner of my balcony. My apartment had never been this quiet. No late-night calls, no guilt for turning off my phone on Sundays, no mental checklist of gauze packs for mom or premium coverage payments for dad. One late afternoon, driving past the old neighborhood on the way to an alumni dinner, I paused outside 2487. On the lawn stood a sign, "Bank-owned property, no trespassing." The white wooden gate I'd repainted in 2020 had faded. The oak tree in the yard stood bare, its trunk cracked. No one had bothered to prune it. No dog barking. No guitar from the garage. No smell of Mom's Sunday cinnamon waffles. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there, window rolled down, letting the wind move through my hair. I looked at that house once, my whole world, and felt distant. I had kept that place alive, not with brute force, but with wire transfers, self-denial, nights spent closing reports so the bills could be paid for others. I didn't have to burn it down. I just stopped carrying buckets to the fire, and it collapsed on its own. My phone vibrated in my bag. Another call. Mom, then Dad, then a voicemail I didn't open. I didn't need to hear to know what they'd say. I simply silenced the phone, dropped it back into my bag, and pulled away. I drove slowly, as if leaving behind not just an address, but a role I'd been forced to play. No anger, no blame, just curtain call. That night, I sat in my little kitchen, a warm amber light falling over the old wooden table I'd bought at a flea market, a steaming cup of peppermint tea in my hands. I didn't need to be seen to exist. I didn't need a will to know my worth. I had written it line by line with silence, with responsibility, with the choice not to return. For the first time in years, I wasn't wearing a watch, wasn't checking a calendar, wasn't scanning my inbox. I just sat there listening to the soft murmur of the city beyond my window, and I knew I was finally free. Ava's story is a clear reminder that sacrifice should never become a lifetime obligation just because of family. When love is weighed against injustice and exploitation, walking away isn't betrayal, it's courage. In real life, if you've ever been seen as the stable one who doesn't need anything, remember, you have the right to be acknowledged, to make choices, and to say no without apology. Ava sat in her quiet kitchen, the weight of years lifting. She realized her worth wasn't tied to fixing others' messes. It was in choosing herself, a lesson carved from silence and strength. What do you think of Ava's decision? Was she too cold or just claiming what she rightfully deserved? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family.